Welcome to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, Tapelo Baslela. Welcome to the show. In today's show, we'll be breaking down the role of the IEC, and secondly, we'll also be discussing the upcoming election and how the independent candidate aspect is going to affect it. To discuss this with us and educate us is Mr. Sy Mamabolo, who is the current CEO of the IEC. He had also been presiding over the Gauteng election as the provincial electoral officer from 2004 to 2012, from 2012 to 2017 as a deputy CEO, and now from 2017 to date in his position as the current Chief Electoral Officer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tapelo, and we're happy to be joining Palatable Politics. We hope that the intervention that we're making with this program, it will help all of us to get greater participation of young South Africans into the political life of the country, and in particular in the electoral process of the country.
Yeah, thank you. So let's start there, right? The participation of citizens and youth in particular in the electoral process. I'll start with a fundamental question. Do you think the citizens and youth in particular actually care?
Yes, indeed, I think so. South Africans care very much about their public life. However, our research is beginning to tell us that people are losing trust in institutions of governance. People are beginning to lose trust in public institutions. So it is a collective responsibility that we all bear as the Electoral Commission, political parties, and government to fashion out a conversation, a national conversation with everybody to say, how do we turn back the tide of receding trust in public institutions and ensure that all South Africans believe in democracy, believe in voting, and thereby electing people who they think are better placed to deliver on their developmental aspirations.
So, in line with reaching that, can you outline to us exactly what the role of the IEC is, what it does from a day to day, and also in terms of the actual elections itself?
Well, the function of the IEC primarily is to maintain a voter's roll, to ensure that all eligible citizens are registered and are on the voter's roll. We begin registering young persons at the age of 16 as soon as they get their smart ID cards. And you, however, appear on the voter's roll on your birthday when you turn 18. So at the moment, we have just under 26 million South Africans who are on the voters' roll. The other function of the IEC is to maintain a party register. And that means registering all parties that exist in South Africa. And registering on the party register means we protect your distinguishing symbols, your logo, your name, and your abbreviated name. Then we've got to manage the candidate nomination process. We've got to print ballot papers. We've got to train staff. We've got to secure voting stations and ensure that the staff that we deploy into those voting stations are competent to carry out the electoral process as demanded in terms of the electoral law. Another element of our functions include communicating with the public, making the public aware when are these electoral processes happening, how are they going to happen, at what times are they going to be happening. So that's general communication area with members of the South African public. And lastly, we've got to inform South Africans about how their vote gets translated into a seat in a legislative assembly, such as the National Assembly or a provincial legislature, which means we've got to engage in a voter education campaign that empowers citizens to understand when I mark my ballot in this way, how that goes through into the process, get counted, and ultimately reflected as a seat in a legislative assembly.
Okay, so we'll come back to the ballot paper because there's been a lot of talk as to it's going to be long, there's going to be more columns, etc. But before that, let's start with what the system is and how it operates now, and how the new amendment bill has changed that. So basically, what are the differences and how does that affect everything?
First of all, until 2019, only political parties could field candidates. Now, the Electoral Act was challenged in that regard, and the Concord found that the aspects of the Electoral Act were unconstitutional to the extent that they allowed only parties to stand for elections. The Minister of Home Affairs, Minister Mtsoaledi, then tabled a bill which was debated in Parliament for most of 2022. It was eventually passed in 2023 February. Now, that's the how the previous system worked. It was essentially a closed party list proportional system, which involved no independence. It was based on two ballots. You had the first ballot paper as the national ballot, but that national ballot we did a double count on it because the first count related to where it was cast, in which province it was cast, and it determined the number of representatives from that province into the National Assembly. The same ballot was used as a compensatory ballot. In other words, when all ballots are put together at the national level to determine the number of seats available for each party out of the total of 400 seats. So that's how the elections of the National Assembly happened until 2029. Until 2019, my apologies. Yeah. Now, going forward, for the first time, as I indicate, there will be independent candidates participating in the elections of the National and Provincial Assembly. Instead of two ballots that we are accustomed to, in these elections, we're going to have three ballot papers, and I'm going to explain them one in 10. First of all, it would be the regional ballot, and by region, you must read province. And that ballot, it will be electing people in that province to represent that province in the National Assembly. On that ballot will be political parties as well as independent candidates. So they will be on the same ballot alongside each other. And then you then have the compensatory ballot where all votes of political parties only are used to restore a proportionality, and we call that a compensatory ballot. And then thirdly, you have the provincial ballot, which really it will involve both independents as well as political parties in terms of the elections of the provincial legislature. The third ballot is being introduced to ensure that we don't have one long national ballot of political parties and independent candidates from across the country. So, in a sense, the elections of the National Assembly are also broken down in terms of the 9 provinces. Each province will have almost a unique election to elect its representatives into the National Assembly, and there independence will feature.
So in this, it's still going to remain the aspect of people vote for representation into Parliament, but Parliament is still going to elect the president.
It is so. It is so that in terms of the Constitution, people are going to be electing members of Parliament and members of the provincial legislatures. The members of Parliament will, at their first sitting, elect a president. Similarly, in the province, the members of the provincial legislature will elect a premier.
Okay. And then now with regards to the independents that will be standing, what's the threshold and how are you guys going to deal with the voting aspect of it in terms of numbers? So I'll give an example. If I'm not mistaken, the threshold number now is 90,000 votes for a seat. What happens if historically would know that a political party if it's 90,000 a seat, and if they got 180,000, would mean that they'd get 2 seats. What happens if an independent gets 300,000 votes?
Okay, you are right. When we do seat calculation, the first thing that we have to calculate is the number of votes you need to secure one seat. But that calculation is always dependent on the total valid votes.
Okay.
So obviously, it stands to reason if there's a high voter turnout, that number would accordingly increase. If it's low, then it gets lower as well. The independent candidates and political parties will be and we call that a quota of votes per seat. Now, independent candidates and political parties will be subject to the same quota. Having said that, Tapelo, the reality is this, that all systems in the world have either excess votes or votes that are not enough to give you a seat, what people call wasted votes. All electoral systems, there is no one in the world that you can say it has no wasted votes. Now, at the bottom end, let's take the quota to be 50,000 for argument's sake.
Okay.
At the bottom end, if a party or an independent candidate, they only manage 20,000 votes, clearly they've not reached what you call the threshold, we call it the quota. And therefore, they are unlikely to get a seat, which means the votes cast in favor of those parties are wasted. So that's what happens at the bottom end. The same phenomenon applies at the top end. Let's say you are a candidate. The quota of votes per seat is 50,000, but you get 56,000. We consume the 50,000 votes and give you a seat, and the excess of 6,000 doesn't give you an additional seat. So again, you could say that that excess vote does not lead into a seat. So that's the first issue, really. The second issue is independent candidates, by definition, it's a single person. They're incapable of getting more than one seat, irrespective of their performance. Now, there's a myth that I hear that no, those votes are their excess votes, in other words, are going to be taken and given to political parties. Nothing could be further from the truth. What actually happens when we allocate seats and we found that there are excess votes from independent candidates, they are disregarded from further consideration. They are not being reallocated to any political party. It is not so. So really, that's how the system works. It's inherent in all electoral systems. It's worse, in my view, in direct constituency systems where the voter with the highest votes, the candidate with the highest votes get the seats, and everybody else in that constituency have lost. So I suppose it's a feature of electoral systems, and there's very little you can do to do that, unless, of course, we introduce very complicated systems where you say, this is my candidate, and then if I have excess seats, excess votes, they must be taken and given to another candidate. What we call transferable systems. My own view about transferable systems is that they are very complex, and even if you tell people up front that I'm Sy Mamabolo, but if I have access votes, give them to Tapelo. I think there's something that's very not neat about it.
Okay. Now, let's play out a bit of a scenario here. No? You have Ndombi standing as an independent.
Yeah.
She reached the 50,000 threshold.
Quota,
She gets
yeah.
a seat. Sorry, quota.
Yeah.
And then, some odd reason, it's 10 past 4. She says, hey, I want out. I'm resigning. I'm quitting. Or unfortunately, let's say something.
That's right.
Whatever. What happens? Does Jabu, who was next, come on? Do you just get rid of that seat? How does that
Yeah,
go?
let's just say Ntombi is a member of parliament. She's an independent. She got in, she reached the threshold. After a year, she says, this is not for me. I don't like how parliament functions. I think I can be effective in industry or some other place. Ntombi resigns. What happens? We will then remove Ntombi's votes from the equation and do a recalculation of a new quota and allocate that to the next contestant who will qualify. In a sense, we're giving it to the next eligible contestant, be they an independent candidate or a party candidate, for as long as your votes justify the fact that you would have been the next logical recipient of the seat. That will happen and you'll be appointed in that manner.
Okay. Now, we've dealt with that part of it. And we've recently, I think it was 2021, where the Political Party Funding Act came in, which regulated funding around political parties. How is this now going to be done with regards to independence and how they come about their money, fundraising, and like, how are we going to deal with that?
Okay, party funding, there are two components to it, maybe three components. The first component is that the Constitution demands that a framework be put in place to provide public money to political parties and now, by extension, to independent candidates once they win seats in their respective legislatures. There are proposals that the Minister of Home Affairs has made to Parliament to amend the Party Funding Act to facilitate the inclusion of independent representatives. Independent representatives are those independent candidates who have won their seats in the legislatures. So we are eagerly awaiting for Parliament to process that act and determine how the monies will then be distributed to independent representatives as well. That's number one. Number two, we have the Multi-Party Democracy Fund. And this is a fund where corporates, individual citizens can make contributions and as part of strengthening multi-party democracy in our country. It is quite regrettable, I must say, that the Multi-Party Democracy Fund has not been able to attract the funding that we need to give money to political parties and independent representatives. So I just really want to take this opportunity to call on industry, to call on corporates, to say, if our democracy is to be sustainable, it needs to be well funded. We need well-resourced political parties. We need well-resourced independent candidates and so on. It can only be done if we do it ourselves. Otherwise, we run the risk of external forces, external interests, shaping our own politics. And I think it's an undesirable reality. South Africa must find ways of resourcing its own politics.
Okay. You spoke about the external forces or third parties that are influencing the election. One would ask, I understand in some cases, but what would be wrong if, for example, a BRICS country would like to give to a ANC or whoever they would want to? What would be wrong with that, particularly if the country, as I say, we are aligned with where the different treaties or even AU countries saying, hey, okay, you know what, let's help fund Steve or Tom or Peter or whatever. What's wrong with that?
We are a sovereign democracy. And if we want to maintain the status as a sovereign democratic state, we've got to find the means to internally resource our politics to avoid imperial interest that will determine the course of our public life. Because you might think that certain interests are benign to start off with, but when there are changes in those jurisdictions and hostile people take over, they may act in a manner that is detrimental to our developmental course as a country. So it is therefore important that our politics remain sovereign politics and less likely to be influenced by international interest. So, which is why we say that the Constitution says there must be public money funding the political activities in the country of people who have proven representation, proven support, in other words, as well as the independent representatives. So the fathers of our constitution anticipated that our democracy and our politics must largely remain sovereign, free from external influence.
Okay. Now, on the second part of it, the multi-party democracy fund. One, what's the figure? And two, what the targeted figure that you believe would suffice in terms of ensuring that both parties and independents would be sufficiently resourced to be able to contest elections. But secondly, with that figure, why can't the state, the fiscus, give us? I mean, it can give ESCOM however much. What's a billion here or two towards that? Is there anything stopping that?
Well, firstly, the Multi-Party Democracy Fund has so far disbursed about just over 5 million. Now, it's a pittance in my opinion.
So over how long?
Over the last 2 years.
Okay.
It's quite a pittance in my view. What is ideal? I don't know how much it costs to run a party, but I think something in the order of 100 million, if we're able to raise that as a start, would be a big contribution to democracy. Now, already the Constitution provides within the party funding framework, there's a Public Representative Political Parties Fund, RPPF, and currently there's about just over 300 million that is made available by the fiscus, and that is distributed to parties according to a predetermined formula. Again, political parties are saying it is not enough because with the advent of the Party Funding Act, parties are saying our historical funders are no longer funding us. So the state must now increase the funding of political parties. We know that there isn't enough money in the fiscus. They are all competing priorities from the fiscus. But still, the political need out there is great.
Okay. And I assume that in money given that, I mean, we've largely discussed the aspect of receiving, but with regards to the expenditure of those funds, is there anything in place? Is there anything that stops me as an independent who gets part of that 5 million and stops me from going to a Cubana and
No, because in the act itself, there are purposes for which the money can be used, and there are also accountability mechanisms for that money. In fact, it must be audited once a year, and by a registered auditor, and the audit report must be submitted to the commission, and the commission compiles all those audited statements and present a report to the National Assembly. And the commission is then audited by the Auditor General on how the monies were dispersed to parties, and looks at the audit reports of the various political parties.
Okay, all right. Now coming back to the voter registration, voter turnout aspect of it, you did indicate that members of citizens are able from the age of 16 to register once they get a smart ID, but they will only appear on the voters' roll once they're 18. That's pretty straightforward. Now you get issues of land grabs, informal communities, where people see a space, decide, hey, let's occupy this. Now they live there, it's an informal settlement. One, are those guys eligible to vote? Two, how do they go about it?
Yes, they are eligible to vote because if they are citizens of the country, and if they have the necessary documentation, which is a smart card, a green barcoded ID, and a temporary identification certificate issued by Home Affairs.
Address?
Now, the issue of an address, I think there's been a bit of confusion, and I think it's important that we clarify that. The court did not say if you don't have an address, you lose your right to vote. You still have a right to vote. The court did say, though, if a person has no formal address, then you must have a description of where they live. Now, what we've done with the technology that we introduced in 2021, when you register and you don't have a formal address, we will take the geo coordinates of the place where you live and we'll place them on the record as the record of where you live. And in fact, currently, 94% of persons who are on the voters' roll, we either have a address for them or we have particulars of where they live.
6%?
96%.
Oh, and the 4%?
The 4% we still don't have. Again, they don't lose their right to vote. When they come to vote, before they are given the ballot paper, they'll have to give us those details, either an address or the details of where they live. And in that manner, will improve the records on the voters' roll.
Okay, and with regards to students, because I mean, I know generally example now there's voter registration, which is November.
November, you're
In
right.
November, as a student, I might be home in Eastern Cape, but when voting day actually comes, whenever that proclaimed date will be, what should one do if where they will be during the time of registration and the election date, whatever that is? What should they do? How should they deal with that if those are two different locations?
Yeah. First of all, it is our sincere hope that by the time we go to the national registration weekend in November, we will have the date of an election because announced by the president. That is important because it will help us to determine, it will help voters determine where they may be when the election date comes, whether they'll be home, whether they'll be in a school or whatever. But let's just assume that you are in matric this year and you're going to be in a university, which we don't know at this point, because we don't know what the results would be. You can still, after registering at the university, use the online system to update your particulars.
During that date or just throughout?
Yeah, you can update anytime until the elections are proclaimed. So our expectation is that the president will announce the date and then proclaim it later, because a proclamation closes the voters' roll. So it is our hope that it's announced and then proclaimed later to allow for people to make updates when they know where they will be living next year.
And what are you guys doing, or how are you guys going about increasing the voter registration? Because the numbers have shown that there is a low take up by youth. I mean, even those that are able to register don't necessarily make it to the voting station on the day.
Two things. Amongst other measures, we have a program, the Schools Democracy Week, where we're going to high schools, engaging young persons in debates such as this. and then registering them. We're partnering with the Department of Home Affairs for the issuance of identity documents and so on. And then in March, we have an annual program within the higher education fraternity. Last year we had vets and we rolled out throughout the country. This year we launched at Rhodes, where we're really going to those institutions again to engage in civic and democracy education debates, and then using those opportunities to register young persons. But thirdly, the online registration portal that we launched is really intended to make it easy for young persons to vote, to register and to vote. The voter registration portal is available at all times, 24/7, and you register at your leisure. You don't have to go to a queue, and it's an easy, very intuitive a tool that young persons can use. And from time to time, we do run campaigns to popularize it, so that to try to improve uptake. Currently, close to 470,000 persons have used it, but we want to improve on that.
Okay, so we've gotten to the point where we can register online. How far are we from voting online?
My sense is that it's certainly not before 2024, but it is on the national agenda. The Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs will be undertaking a study tour in the next too distant future to go look at what other jurisdictions have done. We have had a workshop with them, with the Portfolio Committee, because we really want to get to a point where we can run a pilot and say, in this ward or in this area, we run a pilot and see how people react to the use of technology in elections. But certainly, from my vantage point, technology is the future, is not avoidable. At a point, South Africa would have to embrace voting using some level of technology.
And with regards to the special voter, those, who qualifies and how do they go about it?
Well, two things about special votes. Special votes happen 2 days before the general election day. You need to apply for a special vote by a date which will be determined and announced in terms of the timetable. Who qualifies? There are two categories. There's a category of persons who may be visited either at home or in hospitals. And that category, it has to be people of advanced age, pregnant women, and those that are in hospital. That type of, so those that are incapacitated somehow, who are not able to travel to the voting stations, those can apply for a home visit, what we call a home visit. The rest of us, journalists, police officials, and so on, and other members who are of the public who may not be within their voting stations on election day, you can apply to go vote early. You don't have to prefer a reason, as long as you won't be in your voting station on election day. As long as you've made an application, you can go to your voting station early to cast your ballot.
So if I'm working somewhere for someone and this person doesn't exactly want me to go and vote, or I have to work on the day I can't get off, I can also go apply for the special
Vote and vote on either
yeah.
the 2 days preceding election day.
Oh, there's no issues there.
No, there would be no issues there.
Okay, all right, no, thanks. But for the benefit of you guys, we'll just also add a link of one where one can register to vote, but also secondly, the special vote where one can register to sign up for that. Lastly, there was the research of the Afrobarometer, which was brought upon by the Institute for Justice.
Yes.
Which indicated that between 46 and 47%, I just don't remember the number exactly, where they were indicating that 46% of people that participated in the study would be open to authoritarian government
Yeah.
leadership. How do you feel about that? And also, I guess, in democracy in itself, how do you feel about democracy without risking it?
We are no, certainly no. We are aware of those research studies, and it's worrisome. Which is why I began by saying, as the Electoral Commission, other Chapter 9 institutions, a government, political parties, we really have got to fashion out a program of engaging in a national conversation about the value of democracy, um, and why elections are an important mechanism of self-governing, where we elect our representatives and so on. But the biggest issue, really, for people, I think, is that they've got to realize the developmental benefits of a democracy. When there's tangible development, and people, they can see that the country is on a progressive developmental trajectory, I think that is the best answer. The answer is not going to be so much on what we say, but the answer really is going to be on what people perceive to be the developmental trajectory of the country.
Okay, thank you. So from our side, we're done. Is there anything you would like to pass on, clarify to our viewers, youth in particular?
Certainly, I do want to take the opportunity to congratulate you on starting this initiative. And we hope that this initiative will help us to encourage South Africans to stay the course in terms of the democratic processes of the country. In particular, let's take advantage of the facility online to register, update our details if we've changed addresses. But in case you don't want to use the online, on the 18th and 19th of November, it's an opportunity to come to the voting station and correct your details or register anew. This democracy is about you and me. It's about all of us. It can be only beneficial and enriching if all of us do take part. Otherwise, it becomes empty and hollow.
Okay, now, thank you very much for being with us today and educating us. If there are any changes, we are going to reach out.
Certainly.
Again,
Certainly.
to viewers, thank you very much. I hope that you like, subscribe, and those other things to join us, and see you again. Thank you.